Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here on this beautiful, blessed holiday celebration. The theme for April is living everyday wonder, creativity. The topic for today is reveal, release, rise, and repeat. For our passage for this Easter Sunday, I'm first going to read something from Eric Butterworth. When you really know yourself as a spiritual being, you experience the fulfillment of the law which rushes, streams, and pours into you in substance, supply, and all that's required for success. Pierre Prodervan wrote, "There are no neutral thoughts. Every single thought is charged with a quality of energy. And when charged with love, every thought can contribute to the healing of the planet and the transformation of the world." Let's declare together, daily I rise in love, wonder, power, and glory. Yay! So it is. And now I have the honor of introducing our amazing, beautiful Reverend Kathleen, who will deliver our sacred message today. Thank you.
Monica, that was so beautiful, so beautifully presented. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So today we continue. Oh, yeah, let's put this out of the way. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. So today we continue with celebrating Holy Week, and also with the awareness of our theme for the month of April, which has to do with creativity. We're continuing with the overall living everyday wonder, but a focus on creativity. And so how is the creative process revealed in some of these sacred stories? And so let us remember not to get caught up in whether the stories, such as the Easter story or Passover, are based on historical fact. You know, that's the part that we must let go of and understand that the mystics who wrote those stories, many of them were passed down by verbally first, had a higher purpose than historical fact. Their purpose was to teach spiritual truths, spiritual principles, to help their people, and they turn out to be universal principles, help their people rise above the daily challenges and to live happy and prosperous lives through their connection with the one source, the one life, the one presence, the one power, which is God. And so if we have that as an overall understanding, then we can look at these stories from a place of what does it mean for me today? What is the nugget of spiritual information, principle, practice that I can use in my life? Otherwise, we're just listening to a story, we walk away, there's nothing really gained from it. So let us remember that this is the purpose of Jesus' teachings, the purpose of those who reported his teachings, was to get across the essence of this truth, the spiritual truth, these teachings. So today I offer you 4 steps to unleash your creative nature, your divine nature which is creative. We are one with the creative genius of the universe. Our nature is to create. So this is about honing and understanding how it is that we unleash that inner splendor, that creative flow of the divine in us, through us, and as us. And so the steps are reveal, release, rise, and repeat. So Jesus, so let's do reveal first. Jesus stands as the great example, the way shower of this thing called showing up in full divinity in human form. And so they called him the Christ, Jesus the Christ, because that Christ principle, which is something from ancient times, meant the anointed one. It meant the one who is revealing the nature of God. And he made something very clear to all of us. He said, these things I do and even greater things you shall do. He also, when he did the Lord's Prayer, he called us his brother. He was imparting the wisdom that he had gleaned himself about how it is that we more fully demonstrate the divinity that we are in truth. So as a master teacher, he taught through parable, through story, and he also demonstrated the power of this creative power flowing through him, which showed up as his healing ministry. So he demonstrated it through his life. He taught it and he lived it. And so we too are to be the revealers of the one Creator. Ernest Holmes, our founder, wrote, Jesus taught a power transcendent, triumphant, absolute, and positive, against which lesser laws meant nothing. By its, in this divine presence, this power, by its very presence within us, it heals. It heals. So through our intention to reveal the grand artist of the universe, this great power of creation, we become conduits of infinite potential because we're tapped in to the universal mind of God, a field of infinite potentiality and possibility. We are conduits of vitality, and we are conduits of creative energy. And we act upon this through the power of intention, just like we did when we started this morning, when I asked you to set intention. Our intention to be revealers of the divine presence is where it all starts. And to live that intention consistently through what? Spiritual practice, meditation. We have an affirmative prayer called spiritual mind treatment that we teach. And through visioning, the process of visioning, another great spiritual practice. So that's reveal, about revealing what is our true nature. The next is release. And Ernest Holmes wrote, we all have the ability to transcend previous experiences and rise triumphant above them, but we shall never triumph over them while we persist in going through the old mental reactions. So that means telling our story over and over again, the story of woe, whatever it is, or the mental reactions when we catch ourselves reacting to the way someone drives, or if someone doesn't show up the way we think they should when we react. And we all have these challenges. This is part of our humanity, yet this is what we must triumph over and transcend. And so, what are the old mental reactions? What are the stories that you tell yourselves that you're ready in this moment to set an intention to rise above? What is it? I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. What is it for you? And then set an intention to release that story, to rise above it. once and for all. Just as Jesus rose triumphant over death in the Easter story, we can apply this symbolism to our daily life then. The pain and the suffering that we endure come from our attachment to what is called the unholy trinity of mental reactions: blame, shame, and regret. The unholy trinity: blame, shame, regret. So when we decide to release those things, actually, what does it feel like to be in that state? It's the crucifixion. We can feel crucified. And to this modern day mystic, Dolly Parton advised, get off the cross, somebody else needs the wood. Oh. So in order to enter what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven within, we must be willing to get off the cross of blame, shame, and regret. So when we do that, that's release. We excavate those buried stories of who did what to whom, you know, those stories. Those stories that require our forgiveness. And so our willingness to forgive then is a willingness to release it. To not only release the story, but all of the resentment and anger and hurt and so on that goes with it. Releasing the story. And if you have a challenge, we have professional licensed practitioners in this community who can help you. That's release. Now we're to rise up. Rise up means choosing to create a life from the upper room of consciousness. And I am going to thank Emma Curtis Hopkins for that particular phrase, the upper room of consciousness. So the infinite invisible is always wanting to create through us. When we rise above blame, shame, and regret, the unholy trinity, we literally take the stone or the block or the rock out of the flow of that beautiful stream of life and allow ourselves then to live in a natural state of inspiration, new ideas, solutions, whatever it is that's necessary for you to live a happier, more fulfilled life. And the visioning process is the go-to for me for that process of unblocking. It's not only a way to catch a higher vision, but it's also, there's some questions in there that says, what must I release? What must I become in order to rise into a vibrational match of that particular vision? So we center in divine love. We ask questions like, what is God's greatest idea of my life? And then we listen with reverence, with deep reverence. And we wait for the answer. And this is not something that's one and done. This is an ongoing spiritual practice. And then comes the time to trust. Once we catch the vision, and to do our inner work of releasing and embracing and trust that the universal law, the law of God, is on the job. And so then it's a matter of patiently waiting in trust, letting the gestation process, you know, when we plant new seeds, new ideas into the creative medium, it's like planting it into the womb. And so that womb of the divine then produces in its own time, in its own process, the results of what we plant. Isn't that beautiful to think of that imagery? And so then it begins to show up as transformed versions of ourselves and transformed versions of our circumstances and our life conditions. So that's rise. And then finally repeat. So we have reveal, release, rise, and repeat. It's an ongoing process, these three things. And why? Why is it an ongoing process? Because many in this world are caught up in lower states of consciousness and the suffering that results. And because we have these five senses and we're able to witness it, because we have hearts and feelings, we are able to sense it. And so the idea is, yes, we want to be compassionate and we want to do what we can to alleviate suffering. But it's really important not to get caught up and tempted and pulled into the lower vibrational behaviors of gossip, hate, and judgment. And those things are spread, we know, not only by social media, but maybe even people that we are in contact with. And so this is why it is so important to stay engaged in reveal, release, and rise. That's our spiritual practice. Ernest Holmes says, science of mind, our beautiful teaching, is a teaching and a practice, an ongoing practice. For that reason, we live in this world of effects. So for my closing story, and then we'll move into our beautiful communion experience and ritual. My closing story takes place it began in the early 20th century when the Jews from Eastern Europe were fleeing religious persecution, and they immigrated to the United States in large numbers. One family by the name of Karnofsky, after suffering hardships of their journey, were filled with compassion every time they saw someone else suffering. So one day, the Karnofsky family saw a 7-year-old boy who was alone and hungry. And they brought him home and to give him respite. And then they decided, it was so harsh out in the streets to put this 7-year-old boy back out there. So he spent the night with them. And the mother sang him Russian lullabies. And for the first time in his life, he felt something really amazing. He felt kindness as he'd never felt it before, and tenderness. And later, he learned to sing Russian songs and Jewish songs. And over time, this boy was adopted by the family. Mr. Karnofsky gave him money to buy his first musical instrument, which was a custom in Jewish families. Later, when he became a professional musician and composer, he used these Jewish melodies in his compositions, such as St. James Hospital and Go Down Moses. The little boy grew up and wrote a book about his Jewish family who adopted him in 1907. In memory of this family, and until the end of his life, he wore the Star of David and said that in this family, he learned to live a real life and he learned determination. And this is the story of Louis Armstrong. I know when I first read this, I had tears. It was beautiful. Louis Armstrong. So what a beautiful story of reveal, release, and rise that was not only took place within that family, but also blessed Louis Armstrong's life. So the call to action for us all today then is reveal your inner splendor as pure spirit, release the mental blocks, the stories, and rise up in triumph to be the unique, beneficial presence of the divine that you are called to be. So let us breathe. Take a moment and ask yourself, what is my takeaway from this message today? And then turn to someone and share what it is when you receive it. What is your takeaway? Make sure to share with Chavita too. What is your takeaway? So we come now to the next part of our service today, where we rise up through the healing power of community. So I just want to give you a context first, that a long, long time ago in ancient history, and you can imagine it in your own minds, the very beginning people on this planet. And initially, it was survival. So they whatever they caught or gathered for food, they kept to themselves, or maybe even just their immediate family. But then over time, something shifted. And those early peoples began to share with other families and began to create like extended families and communities. And so this tradition of sharing food is kind of a historical background of this thing that we call communion. It's an act of community, act of communion with community. So communion then predates organized religion. Since the beginning of time, people who trust one another, care for one another, and are deeply connected to one another have shared food as a sign of reaffirmation to their relationships with one another. So let us practice communion then to reaffirm our care for one another, our deep connection as spiritual community, and our commitment to rise and reveal our divinity. Let us honor ourselves, one another, and life itself while in this sacred community by eating and drinking together.